Hello and most welcome to page 2030 of the series. I will today continue with the paper Fractal Geometry as a Bridge Between Realms. And then I will continue with this new paper, also by Marks-Tarlow, Synchronicity, acausal connection, and the fractal dynamics of clinical practice. But first, let's finish off page 39. A little remainder of fractal geometry as a bridge between realms. Last time we looked how the self or the demarcation re-enters into itself. So in that way, to read off itself, to understand itself. This process of re-entering, it is what makes the conception or the understanding of something other possible. Something that is a part, not of you, although oddly enough, and this is rather strange, you go to your origin, yourself. You create something other, demarcation. And from that demarcation, all of reality stem. First and foremost, that is what makes reality stem into existence, being perceivable as. It is the original distinction that makes for all distinctions possible. It is the development of something absolutely new. So we can see on page 39 in figure 10 how the re-entering process works. This is also, of course, very close to the famous Möbius strip that twists and twirls on itself and make the behavior almost of two dimensions seem in the end to be yet only one. And here, of course, the very first distinction is the first circle, the first circle. And when you cross twice, that will represent a penetration into a deeper level of marked space. And in the case of two adjacent circles, to cross twice represents entry into an entirely different marked space. And finally, in the case of only one single circle, like the A example in figure 10, to cross twice is to leave and re-enter the original marked area. To re-enter the marked area. The marked area. And the single circle A represents the basic inner-outer distinction of the self. And this is something we mentioned before. Within ourselves, there is an enormity of fractality, more complex than anything else. This is our, if you like, our inner universe. where everything comes both into observation, understanding, you can also call that the past, and how a liminal zone becomes established by the marking. If something is marked like a circle, the thin line is the first development of the possibility of something to be observed, understood, taken in. And why not enjoyed? I like that. The enjoyment of the world starts here by the first distinctions. The first distinctions that makes everything come into existence, to be observed. What is it to be observed? It is to be understood, realized, having knowledge of. Consciousness is not a thing floating above the objects of what reality is. It is not something that is apart, disjunct, or completely other. It does not have the property of being nothing, floating about. It is, in some way, consciousness is the things and not. That is a distinction. This is what Spencer Brown, the logician mentioned on page 39, is meaning how everything starts with a duality, with a marked line. The first distinction to paradox that sometimes stems from the self-referential capacity of a system to re-enter itself. And this is this fantastic that we mentioned many times before. The capacity to re-enter. Maybe, or quite certainly, the fundamental first act of this system. Now we'll now continue to read on the first column of page 39 of the fractal geometry as a bridge between realms. Might as well bring that up as well. There we have Varela, 1975, notes the brilliance of Spencer Brown's interpretation of the paradox of re-entry as an oscillation or as an imaginary state in the form seen in time, as an alteration of the two states of the form. Of the two states of the form. Spencer Brown's discovery of time implicitly links paradoxical form to imaginary numbers on the complex number plane. On the complex number plane, remember the square root of -1 to be remembered. By asserting re-entry as a third value in its own right, in its own right. Varela agrees with Spencer Brown that self-referential dynamics establish the presence of time. Establish the presence of time. Establish the presence of time. With Kaufman, Varela went further to assert that paradox becomes embodied at the most basic level in the very process dynamics of form itself, of the process dynamics of form itself. Of form itself. So form itself is constructive. Perhaps the primal confusion surrounding first distinctions, where a double crossing sometimes leads back to the original marked R area and at other times does not, helps explain why Varela's re-entry dynamics sometimes lead to paradox and at other times do not, do not. Do not. Do not. This primal confusion between inside and outside, self and other, organism, world, becomes even clearer where second order cybernetics dovetails with clinical psychology. Clinical psychology. clinical psychology. In this territory, we find a persistent, fundamental inability to distinguish between the deepest recesses of our own subjectivity versus the intersubjectivity of others. The intersubjectivity of others. Versus the objectivity of a world that exists outside of the organism. Outside of the organism. The notion of primal confusion helps explain the felt reality of dreams and psychosis and legitimates the controversy surrounding psychoanalytic concepts. Psychoanalytic concepts. Such as introjection or projective identification. Finally, it lends a kind of imaginative reality to the apparent out there-ness of everyday experience, as well as to the objective stance of classical science. I will there end the reading of fractal geometry as a bridge between realms, and I will now start. With synchronicity, a causal connection, and the fractal dynamics of clinical practice. Introduction. This paper focuses on synchronicity, a term coined by Carl Jung to indicate meaningful coincidence, meaningful coincidence, or acausal correlations between psychological and physical phenomena. 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 By highlighting synchronicity within psychoanalysis, the authors focus on edges where inner and outer, subjective and objective processes converge. Converge! We believe that both psychoanalysis and neuroscience need to move beyond a Cartesian split between res cogitans of the mind and res extensa of the brain and wider physical reality. Wider physical reality. Which can be achieved by introducing a more nuanced way to conceive boundary conditions. Boundary conditions. Boundary conditions. This approach is now possible with the advent of Benoit Mandelbrot's 1977 discovery of fractal patterns. Fractal patterns that exists within the non-reductive realm of non-linear dynamics and allows for fuzzy edges and infinitely deep interpenetration between seemingly disparate domains. Disparate domains. Disparate domains. Fractal patterns provide a holistic framework for understanding complex clinical processes and intersubjective interactions. Intersubjective interactions. Intersubjective interactions. Many psychoanalytic theorists highlight the significance of relational patterns. Yet no systematic way exists to date for describing the nature of such patterning. We suggest that the self-referential recursive fractal paradigm, including its patterning, including its hallmark qualities, self-similarity, the pattern of the whole repeating within the parts, and scale invariance, the pattern of the whole repeating on multiple size or timescales captures complex informational processes within the relational matrix of the mind, brain, body system as it interacts with another and extends into psychophysical reality. The recursive nature of fractals provides new models and metaphors for capturing analytic concepts. Analytic concepts such as personal identity, transference, countertransference, dynamics, repetition compulsion. and intergenerative and intergenerational cycles. Intergenerational cycles. This paper offers a fractal epistemology as a framework for modeling complex psychological boundaries between self-other and self-world that display seemingly paradoxical qualities of both separating and uniting these domains. Very important, both separating and uniting these domains. And that is indeed paradoxical, so paradoxical. But a pause here for 2030. Let's go check for some quotes. What do we have? Let's see here. What next? What should we do next? Let's have a look-see. So I will go back to page 39. Page 39. And we have a look once more at the re-entry process. And on the first column of page 39, you see in the second paragraph and at the very down and most important, that would be about 10 lines down, Spencer Brown's discovery of time implicitly links paradoxical form to the imaginary numbers on the complex number plane. On the complex number plane. On the complex number plane. So time itself is equaling the recursive action, the making of difference. So for each marking, each new distinction, we get a sort of oscillation, a development of distinctions, a progression. And this links the paradoxical form. Listen carefully now. The paradoxical re-entering into itself is here linked to imaginary numbers on the complex number plane. The complex number plane. So re-entry is the creator of this oscillation. That is the re-entering process. The re-entering process. And this also helps to understand how confusion, this is a sort of primal confusion between inside and outside, self and other, as you can read on the second column of page 39. Page 39. And how dreams sometimes can be so felt to be real. And psychosis. And also how we idealize a distinction in this imaginative square root of -1 to be completely out there. I'd say that is a variety of the psychosis or neurosis of viewing one's own dreams as absolutely real, not synchronicity pointing to something. This is very close to what was discovered by the Scottish British neurologist, psychologist Ian McGilchrist, that schizophrenics always see the outsideness of themselves to be absolutely real. The psychosis lies in the complete reality of the outer world. It becomes too much. The establishment of the otherness as always existing, always being there, except anyone seeing it, except from imaginary stemmings. That is the psychosis. It is the psychosis of the other to be living its own life apart from us. I will only add one quote here from Synchronicity, acausal connection, and the fractal dynamics of clinical practice. On the first page, which will be 468. We suggest at the end, third line from the bottom, we suggest that self-referential recursive fractal paradigm, including its hallmark qualities, self-similarity, the pattern of the whole repeating within the parts. Remember how it went into itself, the re-entry, which made for the oscillation. The oscillation. And apart from interpenetration, we have scale invariance, the pattern of the whole repeating on multiple size or time scales. There's both size and time scales. Remember Susie Frobel with an F of Robel. So re-entering and scale invariance in both space and time. This paper offers a fractal epistemology as a framework for modeling complex psychological boundaries between self and other and self and world. That display seemingly paradoxical qualities of both separating and uniting these domains. There's a bit of a repetition of the previous paper. Important thing here is the interpenetration to the self itself, the re-entering that makes for an oscillation, which is the discovery of both time and space, both time and space, and scale invariance, both when it comes to space and when it comes to time. Remember Susie Frobel. Well, that's a handful. Thank you very much for joining in. Have an excellent morning, day, or afternoon, wherever you are. Bye-bye for now.